What's up, everybody? My name is Shree Wallace, and I'm coming to you today to give you the facts. So this video is all about who's running for the presidential election and what they stand for. So I'm just giving you the facts, not pushing any parties, any candidates, because I mean, if you're like me, it's probably my first time doing research on all the candidates. So I'm gonna make the work easy for you, all right? So we have Joe Biden, we have Howie Hawkins, President Trump, Joe Jurgensen, and I'm sure you probably haven't heard of half of those names. So we're gonna get into it.
It's not a game, it's a redskin.
Okay, first stance today is abortion. All right, so what do we stand for? Howie Hawkins. His campaign website says, I support the legal framework established in the Roe v. Wade decision. During the first trimester, it is up to the pregnant woman to decide whether to get an abortion. During the second trimester, laws can only regulate abortion to protect the health of the mother. During the third trimester, or after fetal viability pursuant to Planned Parenthood v. Casey, laws can restrict or prohibit abortions except in cases where it's necessary to protect the mother's health. And he also says, I oppose the targeted regulation of abortion clinics and providers through laws or policies that go beyond what is necessary to ensure patient safety. I support the laws that allow physicians as well as non-physician health professionals, including physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, and certified nurse midwives to perform abortion procedures. Joe Biden. For abortion, Joe Biden says as president, he will work to codify Roe v. Wade, and his Justice Department will do everything in its power to stop the rash of state laws that so blatantly violate the constitutional right to an abortion, such as so-called trap laws, parental notification requirements, mandatory waiting periods, and ultrasound requirements. Biden will reissue guidance specifying that states cannot refuse Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood and other providers that refer for abortions or provide related information, and reverse the Trump administration's rule preventing Planned Parenthood and other family planning programs from obtaining Title X funds. Biden will rescind the Mexico City policy that President Trump reinstated and expanded. Joe Jurgensen. Her website says, keep the government out of it, no subsidies, no regulations. President Donald Trump's website says the president has kept the promises he's made in 2016 to the pro-life community and has delivered unprecedented victories for the pro-life movement. He took executive action to stop taxpayer money from flowing to Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion business in the country. He reinstated and expanded the ban on Americans' tax dollars paying for abortions to foreign countries. He is standing with the Catholic nuns known as the Little Sisters of the Poor, defending from the Obama-era regulations forcing them to violate their religious beliefs by providing health insurance that covers abortifacients. Criminal justice. Joe Biden. Joe Biden's campaign is to create a new $20 billion competitive grant program to spur states to shift from incarceration to prevention, invest in educational opportunity for all, expand federal funding for mental health and substance use disorder services and research. Expand and use the power of the U.S. Justice Department to address systemic misconduct in police departments and prosecutors' offices. Establish an independent task force on prosecutorial discretion. Invest in public defenders' offices to ensure defendants' access to quality counsel and eliminate mandatory minimums. Howie Hawkins. Monitor and prosecute white racist terrorists. federal investigations on local police misconduct, community control of the police, end mass incarceration, treat drug abuse as a health problem, not a criminal problem, legalize marijuana, decriminalize personal possession of hard drugs, drug treatment on demand, decriminalize sex work, fight corporate crime, end warrantless mass surveillance, pardon whistleblowers, and political prisoners. Jo Jorgensen says communities should determine whether police officers are required to wear body cameras. She opposes the government hiring private companies to run prisons, solitary confinement for juveniles, mandatory minimums for people charged with drug possession, and a death penalty for drug traffickers. Her campaign website says convicted criminals should have the right to vote. Donald Trump. President Donald Trump and the Department of Justice are working with local law enforcement to protect American communities. The Department of Justice announced more than $98 million in grant funding through the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, COPS, capital COPS, hiring program to allow 802 additional full-time law enforcement officers. The Trump administration expanded Project Safe Neighborhoods to encourage U.S. attorneys to work with communities to develop customized crime reduction strategies. The Department of Justice returned to their longstanding charging policy for federal prosecutors, trusting them once again to charge the most serious, readily provable offenses. Policing. Joe Biden wrote, "While I do not believe federal dollars should go to police departments violating people's rights or turning to violence as the first resort, I do not support defunding police. The better answer is to give police departments the resources they need to implement meaningful reforms and to condition other federal dollars on completing those reforms." He also states that he's been a firm believer in the power of community policing, getting cops out of their cruisers, and building relationships with the people and community that they are serving and protecting. That's why he's proposing an additional $300 million to reinvigorate community policing in our country. Every single police department should have the money it needs to institute real reforms like adopting a national use force standard, buying body cameras, and recruiting more diverse police officers. Howie Hawkins states, "People can now see that the policing system we have now undermines public safety, particularly for Black people. We must fundamentally rethink how we make communities safe. In order to stop the long recurring cycle of police brutality towards Black people investigating the community uprisings, we must create alternatives to policing for many problems. We must restructure the power relationship between communities and their police. We must examine questions like whether a trained counselor or a conflict resolution specialist would be more effective than a police officer in many situations. Whether a mental health worker would be more effective at handling a mental crisis. And we must ask if the economy provided for the material needs of people for employment, income, food, housing, healthcare, and education, could we radically reduce the scope and scale of problems police need to respond to?" Jo Jorgensen's website states, "In today's America, nothing has done more to shine a light on inappropriate police behavior than smartphones." She says it should be up to people in affected communities to decide whether or not police officers should wear body cameras. Donald Trump stated that he strongly opposes radical and dangerous efforts to defund, dismantle, and dissolve our police departments, especially now when we have achieved the lowest record crimes recent in history. His campaign website says that he signed an executive that bans chokeholds, except in situations where the use of deadly force is allowed by law, creates a national database of police misconduct, and provides supplemental funding for police departments which meets prescribed criteria. Economy. Joe Biden's campaign website states the 4 pillars of his Build Back Better economic recovery plan. Mobilize America manufacturing and innovation to ensure that the future is made in America and in all of America. Howie Hawkins' campaign states that we will never reverse extreme and growing economic inequality as long as capitalists exploit workers for profit and extract more unearned income from the economy as rents and interest. Capitalists pay workers for a fixed wage and take the rest of the value workers' labors create as profit. Joe Jurgensen's campaign website states, the real cure for poverty is a vibrant economy that generates plentiful jobs and high wages combined with an affordable cost of living. As president, I will work to eliminate policies that cripple economic growth. I will give special attention to regulations, driving up the cost of housing and healthcare, as well as those creating barriers to creating new businesses or entering professions. Finally, I will work to repeal laws and regulations that prevent individuals and charitable organizations from helping those in need. President Donald Trump's campaign website states that President Trump is unleashing economic growth and jobs. Since its election, Trump's administration's pro-growth policies have generated 6 million new jobs. The unemployment rate has fallen to its lowest point in 50 years, and wages have grown at more than 3% for 10 months in a row. Under President Trump's leadership, Congress passed historic tax cuts and relief for hardworking Americans. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, U.S. gross domestic product growth, has soared under President Trump, topping 3% in 4 quarters under his administration. Social Security. Joe Biden says Social Security is the bedrock of American retirement. And his campaign website lists the following proposals that says, the Biden plan will put the program on path to long-term solvency by asking Americans with especially high wages to pay the same taxes on those earnings that middle-class families pay. Preserve the nature of Social Security. Social Security is one of the nation's greatest public policy successes, in large part due to the fact that participation in the program is shared across almost all workers. And he also wants to eliminate penalties for teachers and other public sector workers. Howie Hawkins' campaign website says we will double Social Security so every person of retirement age has a livable income. The Social Security system will become a true national retirement system. Sin states that as president, I would work to implement a solution like the Cato Institute's 6.2% solution, which would allow any American opportunity to output of the current system while making the current system fiscally stable for those who choose to remain. Donald Trump states that he has and will totally leave Social Security alone as promised, and he will save it. Education. Joe Biden states that support our local educators by giving them the pay and dignity they deserve. Invest in resources for our schools so students grow into physically and emotionally healthy adults. And educators can focus on teaching. Ensure that no child's future is determined by their zip code, by their parents' income, race, or disability. Provide every middle and high school student with a path to a successful career. Start investing in our children at birth. Howie Hawkins states, first, educational policy should be made primarily by teachers and parents through locally elected school boards. Mayoral and state-controlled schools have become a way of closing public schools and imposing educational policies, especially charter school privatization, from the top down. Local parents and teachers have more interest in good local schools than top-down administrators. Joe Jurgensen's campaign website states the Department of Education has failed. In the 40 years since the Department of Education was created, government spending on education has skyrocketed, while the quality of education has declined. Students used to be able to work their way through college and graduate debt-free. As president, I will work to eliminate the Department of Education and return control of education where it belongs, with teachers, parents, and students. Donald Trump's campaign website states that President Trump's proposed budgets have made school choice a priority. The Trump administration successfully implemented the Every Student Succeeds Act to empower states with the flexibility they need to educate their students. The Trump administration implemented the year-round distribution of Pell Grants instead of limiting these grants to spring and fall semesters. The administration brought in financial experts to modernize the way FSA offers and services student loans. Good old gun control. Joe Biden's campaign website states, as president, Biden will pursue constitutional, common sense gun safety policies. Biden will hold gun manufacturers accountable, ban the manufacture and sale of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, buy back the assault weapons and high-capacity magazines already in our communities, reduce stockpiling of weapons, require background checks for all gun sales, create an effective program to ensure individuals who become prohibited from possessing firearms relinquish their weapons. Give states incentives to set up gun licensing programs. Biden's campaign website also states that he would establish a new task force on online harassment and abuse to focus on the connection between mass shootings, online harassment, extremism, and violence against women. Howie Hackins states, ban and buy back military assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, and bump stocks. Universal background checks for gun and ammunition buyers, including closing the loophole for private sales and sales at gun shows, with sales and background check records maintained indefinitely in a central registry. Require all gun owners to pass a gun safety test, a visual test, and be licensed by a government agency, similar to the requirements for attaining a driver's license. Jo Jorgensen's website states that she opposes additional restrictions on the process of purchasing a gun. She also opposes allowing victims of gun violence to sue firearms dealers and manufacturers. Donald Trump states, the Second Amendment to our Constitution is clear. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. Gun and magazine bans are a total failure. The right to self-defense doesn't stop at the end of your driveway. That's why I have a concealed carry permit and why tens of millions of Americans do too. That permit should be valid in all 50 states. Healthcare. Joe Biden proposes protecting and building on the Affordable Care Act instead of switching to a Medicare for all system. His website says, because of Obamacare, over 100 million people no longer have to worry about their insurance company denying or charging higher premiums just because they have a pre-existing condition. Whether cancer or diabetes or heart disease or mental health challenges, insurance companies can no longer set annual or lifetime limits on coverage. Howie Hawkins states, a community-controlled national health service delivering services largely through publicly owned clinics and hospitals employing salaried staff and governed by a federation of locally elected boards will provide accountability and cost control than a top-down Medicare like a national health system paying mostly private providers to deliver health services. Jo Jorgensen's campaign website states, Republican and Democrat policies over the past 50 years are the reason healthcare has become so expensive. Their latest proposals to fix healthcare will further micromanage your doctors and restrict your access to care while failing to solve the underlying problem. She says we can reduce the cost of healthcare 75% by allowing real price competition and substantially reducing government and insurance company paperwork. This will make healthcare affordable for most Americans, while also reducing the cost of legacy programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and the VA. Donald Trump's campaign website states that President Trump has worked to improve access to affordable quality healthcare. As part of the landmark Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, President Trump repealed the individual mandate, which forced people to buy expensive insurance and taxed those who couldn't afford it. President Trump signed a 6-year extension of CHIP to fund healthcare for $9 million. President Trump has mobilized his entire administration to address drug addiction and opioid use by declaring the opioid crisis a nationwide public health emergency. Immigration. Joe Biden's campaign website says that he will adopt some of the following immigration enforcement policies in his first 100 days in office. Number 1, immediately reverse the Trump administration's cruel and senseless policies that separate parents from their children at our border. End Trump's detrimental asylum policies, in the mismanagement of the asylum system, which fuels violence and chaos at the border. Surge humanitarian resources to the border and foster public-private initiatives. End prolonged detention and reinvest in a case management program. Reverse Trump's public charge rule, end the so-called national emergency that siphons federal dollars from the Department of Defense to build a wall. Protect dreamers and their families. Order an immediate review of temporary protected status for vulnerable populations who cannot find safety in their countries ripped apart by violence and disaster. Howie Hawkins' campaign website states that we would demand open borders where movement between nations is free, like it is in the European Union. International borders should be authentic, fair trade zones where people are free to travel across borders for work, shopping, or recreation. The status of undocumented immigrants should be legalized and provide a timely path to citizenship. People crossing international borders would be required to present their identification at a border crossing. Only people wanted for criminal charges or terrorist organization affiliation would be detained. Immigration and customs enforcement and customs and border protection should be abolished and replaced with new immigration agency with personnel committed to the open borders policy. Joe Jorgensen's campaign website states the U.S. should not build a wall along our borders and separate children from adults who illegally attempted to cross the border. Jorgensen supports deporting illegal immigrants who commit serious crimes. She opposes local law enforcement detaining illegal immigrants and transferring them to federal immigration authorities, unless the crime involves a victim and is serious. President Donald Trump's campaign website says, President Trump has enforced immigration laws to protect American communities and American jobs. Upon entering office, President Trump called on Congress to fully fund a wall along the southern border, to close illegal loopholes that enable illegal immigration, to end chain migration and eliminate the visa lottery program. Under President Trump's leadership, the Department of Homeland Security took action to wind down the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program in an orderly fashion. Following the assessment of the Department of Justice that DACA lacks legal authorization, the Department of Homeland Security launched the Office of Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement. The president released his immigration reform proposal, which calls for the transition to a merit-based immigration plan. Trade. Joe Biden's campaign website says the goal of every decision about trade must be to build the American middle class, create jobs, raise wages, and strengthen communities. To stand up for American workers, Biden's tax and trade strategy will take a number of steps, including take aggressive trade enforcement actions against China and any other country seeking to undercut American manufacturing through unfair practices. Rally our allies in a coordinated effort to pressure the Chinese government and other trade abusers to follow the rules and hold them accountable when they do not. Confront foreign efforts to steal American intellectual property. Apply a carbon adjustment fee against countries that are failing to meet their climate and environmental obligations. Support strong and independent trade unions here in the United States and in every one of our trading partners. Howie Hawkins' campaign website states, international borders should be authentic fair trade zones where people are free to travel across the borders for work, shopping, recreation, and residence. Joe Jorgensen's campaign website states, "The freedom to trade and travel are fundamental to human liberty. As American citizens, we should be free to travel anywhere we choose and buy and sell anywhere in the world. As president, I will use my constitutional authority to eliminate trade barriers, tariffs, and work to repeal arbitrary quotas on the number of people who can illegally enter the United States to work, visit, or reside." President Donald Trump's campaign website states that he has kept his promise to track down on trade cheaters and promote fair and equal trade for all Americans. In his first year in office, President Trump took action to protect America's critical steel and aluminum industries, which were harmed by unfair trade practices and global excess capacity. One of President Trump's first actions was to withdraw the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, advancing his agenda to protect American workers. The Trump administration successfully litigated WTO disputes targeting unfair trade practices and protecting our right to enact fair trade laws. So there you have it. But be sure to always do your own research and study diligently, because as every election year, each year is important. I hope this was able to help you in making your decision, but as always, do your own research, have your own mind, and make an informed decision, all right? The country's counting on you.